All right.
Look at them all looking at me in anticipation of what I don't know.
Let me remind you, this was your idea.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay, Sue, so I've got 3 optional questions here.
Okay.
Something...
Are the prizes?
There are no prizes whatsoever. Something funny that happened to you?
Okay.
Something strange that happened to you? Or something...
Yeah, that's what strange happened to me.
What?
Kathy. She followed me home one day and I couldn't get rid of her. Or something frightening?
You sure?
Okay. There's something frightening. I always thought that I would like to ride a camel. And guess what? I didn't. We were in Egypt and we'd been to the pyramids with my children. And Sarah and David were pre-teens, so they were about, 10 and 11. And my husband Jeffrey, and there was a camel ride. So I said, I want to go on the camel ride. So I sat in the front, and they have a basket on like this, and I sat here, and Sarah sat by the side of me, and my husband and my son sat behind us. And the young man who was leading the camels thought it was quite funny and gave me the reins to the camel. And I said, what are you doing? He said, you hold this, you hold this. So he then sends the camels up this hill, and I'm just about wetting myself. I'm freaking out because it's not very stable, and when you're in those baskets on the camel, you go around like this, and I'm just terrified. And the camel behind me, my husband had cologne on, and that camel kept on trying to nibble him while we were going up. So I'm freaking out trying to control this camel, which of course knows exactly what it's supposed to do, and was just having great fun with me, and the little guys around the corner just laughing like crazy. So, and their feet are very, very strange, and so it's like plod, plod, wobble, wobble. And my husband dropped his camera because the camel kept on nibbling at him, so he dropped his camera, which went into some nice brown yucky stuff. So he wasn't very pleased, but that was probably the most, I guess I have a very sad life, probably the most scary experience I've had with animals.
What country was that in?
Egypt.
Egypt. What was happening? Why were you in Egypt?
We were in Egypt because we were on a cruise. We went to England, and it was pouring with rain. And my husband wasn't somebody who could sit still for very long and not do anything. And he said, I can't spend 3 weeks sitting in England in your father's house with 2 kids. I'm going to go insane. And he was very good at going online and finding deals. He was part Lebanese, and I think he could have sold anything to anybody. He used to go into shoe stores and take his shoes off and go up to he knew who to pick. And he'd go into a shoe store and he would wait till the assistant was on their own, and he'd take his shoes off and he'd put his shoes in the garbage. And the assistant would look at him and he said, well, I want 2 pairs of shoes for the price of 1. And he said, I've got no shoes. And the guy would say, well, I can't do that. And he said, well, I've got no shoes now. And he would end up coming out with 2 pairs of shoes for the price of 1.
He was dum-dum.
Yeah, it was no dum-dum, yeah. So we went on a repositioning cruise, which went to Eastern and Western Mediterranean. And so one of the trips off, because we went on all the trips off the boat, and one of them was to Egypt, and to the pyramids, and to the papyrus factories. And I guess the other thing that was really frightening was it was just after the English had been attacked on a cruise line and killed. There was some there was some I guess tourists that had been killed, and so I wasn't aware of that. And as we got off to go on our trip, we had a convoy, and right at the beginning of the convoy were gentlemen with machine guns on the back of a truck, and on our buses were gentlemen with rifles in their coats. and they were in front of the coaches, and they were behind the coaches right till we got to the city limits. And when we got to the city limits, they left us and they picked us up on the way home to make sure we were okay. And we went to the papyrus factory, and we were warned to hold on to our daughter's hands really tightly. She was blonde and she was about 10 years old. And when we went into the papyrus factory, the man behind the counter said to my husband, "I'll give you 30 camels." And my husband said, "What for?" And he said, "The girl." And my husband said, "Well, I wouldn't sell her for 30 camels. You'll have to do better than that." And it turns out that the guy wasn't joking. He was, for real. So it was very creepy there. I must admit it wasn't. Sometimes for me, sometimes it's better to not go to some of these places, because I had wonderful thoughts of how great it would be to go to Egypt and ride out into the desert to the pyramids, and the pyramids were like over there. They've encroached so much on, or their city is encroached so much onto the pyramids. It's very commercialized. You were told you shouldn't make eye contact with any of the children that were begging, and it was very, very uncomfortable, I would say. My daughter was the only one that went down in the pyramids. And she was very brave, and she wasn't claustrophobic at all, but I didn't go down into the pyramids. But that was probably, when I think back now, that was probably the most scary thing, because people looked at my daughter very differently, like a lot of the men there. It was really quite frightening. And the homes there was in the city, along the alleyways, there was these shanty houses that were, I don't know how they went on top of each other, but they did. And people lived like that. And the museum there, we went into the museum, and I have never been into a museum that looked like this. Everything was out on tables like this. All the artifacts, the bones and everything, nothing was behind glass or covered up. It was very hot and it was very humid in there. And actually Tutankhamun's esophagus was there. No, esophagus, that's not right, is it?
Sarcophagus.
That's close enough, right? You know what I mean, right? That was there as well, but there was no. It was so strange to go into a museum with so many beautiful artifacts and nothing to be preserved. It's not like that anymore, but it was very, very strange. But Egypt was a strange country. Israel, we went to Israel and we went to the Dead Sea, and that was bizarre. Has anybody been to the Dead Sea? It's the strangest sensation. You literally cannot sink, and you just bounce back up. And they're all in the water, and of course the salt content is very, very high. And they're there and they're putting all this black mud all over them because it's going to make everybody wonderful. Didn't do much for me, but it's a very strange sensation in that. I didn't really like that.
You are the easiest person to interview I've ever met.
Mouth to mouth?
I have one question for you.
Yes.
How did a Welsh girl end up marrying a Lebanese guy?
Oh, I went to a disco. That was my first thing. I came to Canada in 1974 as a nanny, and it was just before my 18th birthday. Totally naive, I'd been to Austria in a pink aeroplane to go skiing in school. I remember seeing this pink aeroplane and thinking, does that thing really fly? And we went to Austria, and I spent most of the time sitting on my bottom in the snow. I'm not a skier, I guess. And then I decided when I finished school in Wales, which is where I was brought up, I wanted to look after children. And there was only one kind of a place that you could do that in Cardiff. And so somebody mentioned to me about a magazine called The Lady. Has anybody ever... Yeah, you heard of that? Okay, so in The Lady, you could... there was jobs listed all over the world for everything, for housekeepers, for personal assistants, and au pairs and stuff. So I sat down and wrote a whole bunch of letters, and lo and behold, somebody wrote back, which amazed me because I'd never babysat, I didn't cook, and I couldn't imagine anybody would want me to look after their kids. But lo and behold, a number of people did.
You could teach them Welsh, though.
Well, I don't know Welsh.
Oh, okay.
I haven't enough time with English. Anyway, two places stood out that I wanted to go on. One was the island of Sifnos in Greece, and it was an American family that had a villa there, and they'd had many au pairs, and the au pairs could only stay for 6 months at a time. But the family would pay for them to go traveling. Those were the days when it was safe to go traveling. And they would pay you to go traveling for 3 months, but you came back to them after that. And I actually spoke to one of their au pairs who'd had an amazing time and traveled all through the Middle East and all over Europe while looking after these two children for this American family. But there was only one problem there. Because of the unrest in Greece at that point in time, I wasn't 18, and so my parents had to sign that if I got killed or something, they wouldn't mind so much. But they did. So that got mixed, and I ended up coming to Canada. And I came to Canada and remember the most magical feeling I think I've ever had in my life, except for when my children were born. The sky over Toronto, just before I landed, I'd never seen lights like that in my life, and I often wished I could have captured the magic and the excitement that I felt coming to a country with £30 in my pocket and a family that I'd never met before, who turned out to be absolute crazy people. And to a country where I knew nobody, but it was a very wonderful experience, and I learned to cook with ground beef and bread out of the freezer when I got there, because this lady, that's all she ever bought, was bags of frozen ground beef and whole wheat loaves. And coming from England, we had a freezer, a fridge freezer that was no bigger than this chair. And the freezer at the top was just enough to have a packet of frozen peas and a lollipop in there. My dad used to go down every day to the butcher's, to the grocery store, and get all our supplies fresh. Milk was delivered. And so for me to get this frozen stuff, which, anyway, I could cook lots of things with ground beef by the time I left there. So that was my first...
So where's the Lebanese husband?
Oh, the Lebanese husband, sorry. The Lebanese husband I met, I spent 3 years as a nanny, and then I went to work, I thought I could run a bar. Sorry. I didn't want to do a 9-to-5 job, I wanted to do something different. And one of the hotels had advertised for someone actually to be a sales assistant in the hotel, and I thought that would suit me real well. And when I applied, it turned out that they wanted someone to run the bar, which I'd never run a bar or anything. So I ended up doing that, and one day when I was off, I went to a disco and I met my husband, who was English Lebanese. His father was English or Scottish, and his mother was from a very wealthy family in the Lebanon. And so he came by his wheeling and dealing very honestly, yeah. So he was very good at getting deals in all kinds of things. Yeah, so those were wonderful experiences, and I guess it all comes together to make who you are, right? And that's how you got your lunch, because I learned how to cook with a bag of ground beef and a lump of frozen bread.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.